Chapter 3, Habitual. Everything is habitual. Anything you take on and repeatedly do for an extended period of time becomes your habit. Same as anything you don't do for an extended period of time also becomes a habit. On a day-to-day basis, the rule of thumb or incubation period for a habit is 21 days or 3 weeks. And in this most difficult period of time, you can choose to create or destroy any good or bad habits. After this period, you're now plain sailing, as whichever habit you've given up, i.e. smoking, is now behind you, or started, i.e. gym, is no longer a chore. You must really be impartial with yourself and start becoming more aware of your own and everyone else's habits. Your friends, family, colleagues, you name it. Just paying attention to the things people repeatedly do and say will tell you a lot about how they see you, themselves, and the world. You can't just stop there because your number one subject has to be yourself. Believe me or not, but everything is a habit, and we are all the sum of our good and bad habits. If you really want to know who a person is, then observe how disciplined they are. Do their bad habits outweigh the good? Are they easily influenced? Do they stick to their principles, etc.? Most questions about people can be answered by asking yourself one simple question. What are their habits? You can tell what kind of a person someone is simply by observing their habits. The things that they choose to do that turn into a pattern after watching them for a while or for a short time. The words they choose to use in conversation, their tone of speech, body language, the way they dress, the things they laugh at, what excites them, what makes them sad, how clean they are, how they present themselves, how they apply themselves, and the list goes on. Everything about a person is a habit or ritual, which over time will show through their patterns or behavior. The habit starts as a baby with eating and sleeping patterns. As a child gets older, their eating habits will develop as they get familiar with their culture and the family they are born into. Language will be the next habit that forms alongside behavioral habits, depending on the attitude of the family or carers. A child might be aggressive or timid depending on the attitude of the household they belong to. This becomes more evident as they go on into nursery, school, and start mixing with other children. Your habits on a day-to-day basis would start with how many alarms it takes to wake up, how organized you are as you set out for the day. Do you get to work early, or are you always one of the last ones in the door? Do you always have breakfast, or do you eat breakfast as and when you can? Are your clothes always ironed neatly and your tie straight, or are you putting it on as you walk in the building? Now, none of the above is something that happens overnight. These are all traits that if someone does most of their time, then that will become their habits. Once you see a pattern in someone's behavior, then you have to accept that that is their habit and therefore who they are. You can look out for signs of a negative or positive person or a happy or sad person by the language or words they choose to use. A negative habit will show in the use of negative words and attitude, and positive habits through positive words and attitude. Someone constantly looking for an argument or flaws in whoever they encounter shows their character as a buildup of negativity and friction, and that is all they have compounded and will pass on. A pessimistic person will look for the possibility of failure in any obstacle or venture that crosses their path. An optimistic person, however, will find a good outcome or visualize success in whatever they do. Again, all of these are habits, and people like that very rarely have just become that person. The good thing is that all habits once identified in yourself can be stopped, changed, or started. I do not believe it is possible to try to change anybody else though. So once you identify a pattern of behavior or habits that do not sit right with your spirit, then your only option is to distance yourself from that person or group of people. By distancing, I mean that if you live with, have to work with, or spend time with people like that, then I don't mean to physically leave, but that could be a long-term option by moving out when you can or looking for a new job. In the short term, though, what you can do is change your rules of engagement. Start as you mean to go on. By that, I mean change the ways in which you communicate or allow the person or people in question to communicate with you and have less access to you. Habits are built up in every way imaginable, and there are what I would also call rules of engagement between people and groups of people. Distancing yourself in close proximity would be less communication, no output of essential information, so just small talk. The problem is that once the negative patterns or habits have been identified, then ideally you would want to sever all ties, as any further interaction could then become draining on your spirit and over time could manifest in anxiety, depression, or learned behavior. Even if you are more conscious or more powerful than somebody else, it would be unwise to execute your power over them through manipulation to somehow change that person or their habits. Giving them the relevant information or pointing them in the right direction should be enough. Everyone's power of free will is in their own hands, and it is down to them to consciously make the decision to change themselves or their habits. Any habits changed in someone else through manipulation will turn out to be a lesson not learned and easily regressible. Trying to change someone else's habits or patterns of behavior can be draining on your own life force. This can especially be difficult in dealing with loved ones that may be less consciously aware than you are. It is not your job to submit yourself to taking on anyone else's bad habits. It can go one way or the other. They might get it and wake up, or they might keep repeating the same patterns of behavior with no intention of ever changing while draining your spirit with lies and empty promises. You have to always take care of yourself first. You cannot pour from an empty cup. The trick is to try your best to observe and identify any such patterns in yourself and in other people. You must pay close attention to the things that you find yourself doing or saying that have maybe gone below the radar. The words you choose to use during conversation with yourself and with others. The way you carry yourself, the food you choose to eat, the books you read, the music you listen to, etc. These all go towards making you the person you are. Again, as mentioned in the last chapter, a lot of these are going to be default settings programmed into you by family and environments, nature and nurture. Again, it is down to you to try to identify this and drop, keep, or create the habits that you think would suit you best. An example of a change of habits is someone growing up in a meat-eating family that gets to a certain point, all of a sudden decides to become a vegan. That could be the result of observation, research, or influence, or all three. That is just one example again of a habit that might have been programmed into a particular family for generations, that has been the cause of a particular health issue that has reared its head generation after generation. Without looking at yourself and just taking for granted the fact that we have always done it this way, then there would be no hope of change. There's a reason that the first thing a soldier does when he wakes up in the morning is make his bed immaculately, and that they're always up before sunrise. It is apparently that because when you tidy your bed first thing in the morning, it makes your first habit of the day a productive, positive, organized, clean, and tidy act, which in turn subconsciously you will apply it to any other task you undertake for the rest of the day. There are stories of ex-soldiers 20 years out of the army, and to this day when they wake up, their first undertaking has and will be for the rest of their lives to make their bed. A habit like that programmed into a new recruit and taken all the way through their service until retirement sounds like the kind of great habit that would be passed on to the family and kids, and sounds like the kind of great habit that might be performed 3 generations down the line with no concept of how or why the family does this. Now imagine in the case of a bad or negative habit that has been taught, learned and programmed into your family, going on check for generations. If you were not to take yourself seriously and just drank a lot of alcohol just because all the men in your family were heavy drinkers, then that would be your habit to pass on to your children and the next generation to come. Even though that might be the cause of liver cancer, which has plagued the men of the family for as long as you can remember. There are so many other habits that could be directly or indirectly programmed into your psyche with or without your knowledge. The aim is to try to be aware of your habits as best as you can, being aware of the words you use and the way you carry yourself. making sure you give just as much attention to the people around you. Only then can you ever hope to begin to see if they are actually in control of themselves, or are they unknowingly the sum of all their programming. You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So it would be wise to know if the people you are with are positive or negative. If they are aware of being positive or negative, if they are aware, then are they willingly or unwillingly a positive or negative person? Once you can answer these questions, you then have to ask yourself, are these habits worth taking on? If so, then you have a good friend. If not, then that person might not be worth spending your time with. Remember, just because a person is not aware that they are sheep or are a sum of the programming they have been a victim of, does not mean that they do not think that they are in control of themselves or you, and therefore have the right to project their habits onto you with the aim of programming you and controlling you also. An idiot with a plan can beat a genius without one. Warren Buffett. The last thing anyone would ever believe is that they have been or are being brainwashed constantly. And it is all happening bit by bit through the habits they choose from day to day, month to month, and year to year. On a larger scale, we can look at the adverts that are constantly thrown at us and from which nobody is exempt. You would literally have to be blind, deaf, and dumb to never in your life be influenced in some way by an advert. That is the reason why advertising and marketing agencies generate so much money. They make it a habit of suggesting a product or service to the people throughout their waking day. You get adverts on the radio, on the television during program breaks, product placement during shows, billboards as you travel, on the internet, on your social media feeds, and from your neighbors, friends, family, through word of mouth or visually in the new car, trainers, phone, television, etc. they just bought. Advertising would be totally ineffective without habit and pattern. Advertising is what we all do day in and day out. But what we have to sell is our habits. The reason we sell them so well is that we stand by what we believe makes us who we are. First of all, we have been sold this product called habit by a family who would never willingly lie to us. Our friends who have also been sold the same product by their families who they can trust with their lives. Throw in the mix politics, music, government, religion, ethnicity, etc. Then you can see how easily wars can come about. Nazi Germany, for example, who brainwashed the whole country's habits through the media, advertising, propaganda campaigns. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Joseph Goebbels. That is the power of habit, the habit of telling a lie and repeating it for long enough, and the fact that if the lie persists, then the people hearing the lie will now create a habit of believing it. I do believe that this habit can and is done on a personal level, in the form of a person lying to themselves about who they are, even what they're capable of. That would take us into the realm of delusion and mental health.